6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the new human Ethereum colony ship, watching the construction of humanity's first settlement in Ethereum space. The planet below was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents protected by atmospheric shields that kept the environment perfect for both species. Children from both civilizations played together in the colony's parks, while their parents worked side by side, building a future neither group could have imagined alone. The first families arrived this morning, Lisa said as she joined him at the window. She wore the simple clothes of a diplomat now instead of royal robes, having chosen to live among humans rather than the luxury of the imperial palace. 50 human families and 30 Ethereum families, all volunteers who wanted to be part of something new. Jake watched a group of human and Ethereum children chasing each other around a playground that looked like it had grown from the ground itself. The human kids were teaching the young Ethereans how to play tag, while the Ethereum children showed their new friends how to make flowers bloom with just a touch. It's hard to believe this all started, because I found you trapped under some rubble. No, Lisa said firmly. It started because you chose to help someone who needed it, even though it cost you everything. That choice changed the course of galactic history. The alliance between humanity and the Ethereum Empire had moved faster than anyone expected. Emperor Thane had been true to his word, offering humans advanced technology, protection from hostile alien species, and new worlds to settle. In return, humans served as advisors and teachers, helping the Ethereans remember what it meant to put others before themselves. Jake had been reluctant to accept his role as liaison at first. He was just a soldier who wanted to get back to his unit and continue fighting the war against the Zephyrians. But the Emperor had convinced him that his work with Lisa could save more lives than any battle he might win. The human government had agreed, promoting him to colonel and giving him full authority to negotiate on behalf of his species. The medical stations are ready for operation, Lisa reported as they walked through the colony's administrative center. Ethereum healing technology combined with human medical knowledge has created treatment centers that can cure diseases neither of our civilizations could handle alone. Jake nodded as he reviewed the reports on his tablet. The integration was proceeding better than anyone had dared hope. Humans brought their instinct for cooperation and self-sacrifice, while Ethereans contributed technology and resources that seemed almost magical. Together they were creating something that was greater than the sum of its parts. Colonel Martinez, came a voice from behind him. Jake turned to see Commander Roberts, the human military officer in charge of colony security. We've received word from Earth. The Zephyrian invasion of the Tau Ceti system has been stopped. The new weapons the Ethereans provided worked perfectly. Jake felt a surge of satisfaction. The energy shields and advanced firearms that human soldiers now carried had turned the tide of the war. Battles that would have cost thousands of human lives were now won with minimal casualties. The Zephyrians' natural armor was no match for Ethereum technology guided by human tactical thinking. Any word from my old unit? Jake asked. The 47th Marines have been reassigned to peaceful exploration missions, Robert said with a smile. Seems there's not much fighting left to do with the Ethereans backing us up. After Roberts left, Jake and Lisa continued their tour of the colony. They visited the agricultural sectors, where human farmers worked with Ethereum botanists to create crops that could feed both species. They stopped by the engineering districts, where human mechanics learned to maintain technology that responded to thought as much as touch. They observed the schools where children from both civilizations learned each other's languages and customs. My father sent a message this morning, Lisa said as they reached her office. The Ethereum Council has voted to extend the alliance indefinitely. They want to establish joint colonies throughout the galaxy. Jake wasn't surprised. The partnership had exceeded everyone's expectations. Human colonies were safer with Ethereum protection, while Ethereum worlds had become more vibrant with human settlers who brought enthusiasm and innovation to civilizations that had grown stagnant over the centuries. There's something else, Lisa continued. The Emperor wants to establish a new order of knights. Ethereans and humans who exemplify the values that brought our peoples together. He wants you to be the first human inducted. Jake shook his head. I'm not knight material. I just did what anyone would do. That's exactly why you're perfect for it, Lisa said with a laugh. You still don't understand how rare your kind of courage is. Most people wouldn't risk their lives for a stranger, especially when they were already dying themselves. They were interrupted by the arrival of Ambassador Chun, the senior human diplomat assigned to the colony. Colonel Martinez, we've received a transmission from the Centauri Republic. They're requesting human ether mediation in their conflict with the hegemony. Apparently, word has spread about our success in peaceful resolution of disputes. Jake looked at Lisa and saw the same excitement in her eyes that he felt. The alliance was already expanding beyond just military cooperation. Other civilizations were beginning to see humans and Etherians as a force for stability and peace in a galaxy that had known too much war. Set up a meeting, Jake said. We'll see what we can do. As the ambassador left, Lisa walked to the window and looked out at the colony below. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had walked past that building instead of investigating the cry for help? Jake joined her at the window and thought about it. The Zephyrians would have won. The war. Your empire would have continued declining into isolation. Millions of people would have died in conflicts that could have been prevented. All because one person chose to help a stranger. All because it was the right thing to do, Jake corrected. I didn't save the galaxy. I just did what decent people do when someone needs help. Lisa smiled and took his hand. That's what makes it so powerful. You didn't help me because you wanted to be a hero or because you expected a reward. You helped me because you couldn't walk away from someone in trouble. That's the kind of strength that changes civilizations. Jake looked out at the thriving colony where two species were learning to live and work together as equals. Children who will grow up speaking multiple languages and thinking of the galaxy as their home. Adults who were discovering that cooperation produced better results than competition. A future where the instinct to help others was seen as humanity's greatest gift to the stars. The acid rain still fell on the planet where they had met, but now it fell on a monument to Jake's fallen squad and a memorial to the simple truth that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism happen when no one is watching. When someone chooses to hold their shield over a stranger, even as it dissolves in their hands, because that's what decent people do. Jake woke up in a room that looked like nothing he had ever seen before. The walls glowed with soft blue light, and the air smelled clean and fresh. His body felt different too, like the constant pain from the acid burns had simply vanished. He sat up slowly and looked at his hands. The burned skin was completely healed, and there were no scars left behind. You're awake, Lisa said from across the room. She was sitting in a chair that seemed to be made from some kind of crystal, wearing clothes that looked more elegant than anything he had seen on human worlds. How do you feel? Like I should be dead, Jake said as he examined his perfectly healed arms. What happened to me? Ether and medical technology, Lisa said quietly. It rebuilt your damaged tissue at the cellular level. You were dying from acid poisoning, but now you're completely healthy. Jake looked around the room again. Everything was too advanced and too beautiful to be human technology. The furniture seemed to grow out of the floor itself, and lights moved in patterns across the ceiling like living things. Where are we? On board the flagship of the Etherian Empire, Lisa said. My people came to rescue us. Your people? Lisa stood up and walked to a window that showed the stars outside. My name isn't really Lisa. It's Princess Lirale of the Etherian Empire. I was on a diplomatic mission when my ship was attacked, and I crashed on that planet. Jake stared at her as the truth finally made sense. The fighting skills, the strange clothes, her knowledge of alien languages and technology. She wasn't just some random traveler who got caught in the storm. She was royalty from one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. You could have called for help at any time, Jake said slowly. You had that communication device in the tunnel. You could have ended our suffering whenever you wanted. Lisa turned to face him, and he could see shame in her green eyes. Yes, I could have. But I was afraid that revealing my identity would put me in more danger. I thought it was safer to hide among humans until I could find a secure way to contact my people. So you let me nearly die from acid burns to protect your secret. No, Lisa said firmly. I let you nearly die because I was a coward. Because I was so used to people helping me only because of who I am that I forgot some people help others just because it's the right thing to do. Jake got out of the strange bed and walked to the window. Outside, he could see a fleet of ships that looked like they were made from living metal. They moved through space with a grace that human ships could never match. How long was I unconscious? 3 days. The medical treatment took time, and my father wanted to speak with you when you recovered. Your father? Emperor Thane. He rules the Aetherian Empire, and he's very interested in meeting the human who risked his life to save his daughter. Before Jake could respond, the door to the room opened and 3 figures entered. The first was clearly the Emperor, tall and elegant with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. The other 2 were guards wearing armor that looked like it was forged from starlight itself. So this is the human who protected my daughter, Emperor Thane said as he studied Jake. His voice carried the authority of someone who had ruled for longer than most civilizations existed. Jake didn't know what the proper protocol was for meeting alien royalty, so he just stood up straight and tried to look respectful. Your Majesty. The Emperor smiled slightly at Jake's attempt at formality. Please sit. I want to understand what happened on that planet. Lisa told her father the entire story while Jake listened. She described how he had found her trapped under the rubble and immediately risked his own safety to free her. She talked about the journey through the acid rain and how he had used his dissolving shield to protect her even as it burned his skin. She explained how he had been willing to fight 5 Zephyrian warriors with just 2 bullets to keep her safe. And he did all this without knowing who you were, the Emperor said when she finished. He thought I was just another refugee, Lisa confirmed. Someone with no value to anyone except herself. Emperor Thane looked at Jake with new interest. In our empire, people protect others because of political advantage or social obligation. We have not seen genuine selflessness in many centuries. I just did what anyone would do, Jake said uncomfortably. No, the Emperor said firmly. What you did is something our psychological profiles said humans were incapable of. Our intelligence reports described your species as primitive and self-serving. They said humans only helped others when they expected something in return. Jake felt a flash of anger at the insult to his species. Your intelligence reports were wrong. Yes, they were. And that is why I'm here. The Emperor stood up and began pacing around the room. For 3,000 years, the Aetherian Empire has been the dominant power in this galaxy. We have advanced technology, vast resources, and unlimited knowledge. But we have lost something that you humans still possess. What's that? The instinct to sacrifice for strangers. The moral courage to endure suffering so others don't have to. The simple decency to help someone who needs it without calculating the cost. Lisa joined the conversation. I've been telling my father how you held that shield over me even as it dissolved in your hands. How you walked barefoot through acid and sharp rocks rather than let me suffer. How you were willing to die fighting creatures you couldn't defeat rather than abandon someone you barely knew. Our empire has forgotten how to do these things, the Emperor said. We help others because of treaties and trade agreements. We sacrifice because of honor codes and political necessity. But we have lost the ability to simply care about strangers. Jake looked between Lisa and her father, trying to understand where this conversation was going. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to offer your species something that has never been offered before, the Emperor said. A military alliance between the Aetherian Empire and humanity. Not because we need your ships or your weapons, but because we need your moral strength. You want to ally with us because I helped one person? I want to ally with you because your actions prove that humanity possesses something our empire has lost. Something we desperately need to remember. The Emperor sat down across from Jake. Technology can be learned and resources can be acquired, but character cannot be taught. It must be lived and practiced and passed down through example. Lisa walked over and sat next to her father. I want to be the ambassador to your people, Jake. I want to learn how humans stay decent, even when it costs them everything. And I want you to be my liaison, to help me understand what makes someone willing to protect a stranger even unto death. Jake thought about his dead squad mates and the war that was still raging across multiple worlds. An alliance with the most powerful empire in the galaxy could save millions of human lives. But he also thought about what it would mean to work with people who saw his basic decency as something remarkable, rather than normal. I'm just a Marine, he said finally. I don't know anything about diplomacy or politics. You know something. More important, the Emperor said. You know how to do the right thing even when it hurts. That's a wisdom our empire has forgotten, and it's exactly what we need to remember. Jake woke up shivering in the cave as the storm outside began to weaken. His fever had gotten worse during the night, and his vision kept going in and out of focus. The acid burns covered most of his body now, and every movement sent waves of pain through his damaged skin. Lisa was awake and watching him with concern. The rain is lighter now, she said quietly. We should move while we have the chance. Jake tried to stand, but his legs were too weak. Lisa helped him to his feet and let him lean on her shoulder. He was ashamed that she had to support him when she was the one with the injured leg, but his body was failing, and he had no choice. They left the cave and stepped back into the acid rain. It was falling softer now, but still burned wherever it touched Jake's exposed skin. Lisa had torn more pieces from her strange clothing to cover his worst wounds, but there wasn't enough material to protect him completely. They moved slowly through the rocky terrain toward the area where Lisa said they might find help. Tell me about these people we're going to meet, Jake said as they walked. His voice was hoarse from the fever. Lisa was quiet for a moment. They're not exactly people. More like an advanced civilization that has technology we don't understand. They might be willing to help us if we can convince them we're not a threat. Jake nodded, but something about her answer bothered him. She spoke about the aliens like she knew them personally, not like someone who had just heard rumors. There were other things, too, that didn't add up. Her clothes were made from materials that resisted acid better than his military equipment. She spoke several languages he had heard her muttering in her sleep. And she moved with a kind of grace. That suggested combat training. They had been walking for 2 hours when the Zephyrian patrol found them. 5 of the insect warriors came over a ridge with their energy weapons ready. They moved in perfect formation like they had been hunting together for years. Jake pushed Lisa behind a rock and raised his rifle even though he knew 2 shots wouldn't be enough against 5 enemies. Stay down, he told Lisa as the Zephyrians spread out to surround their position. The lead warrior clicked something in their harsh language, and the others began moving closer. Jake aimed at the nearest one and fired. His shot hit the creature in the chest, but barely cracked its thick shell. The Zephyrian stumbled, but kept coming. Jake fired his last shot and missed, as his fever made his hand shake. Now he had no weapons left except a combat knife. The Zephyrians raised their energy weapons and prepared to finish him off. That was when Lisa moved. She came out from behind the rock faster than Jake thought possible and hit the nearest Zephyrian with a spinning kick that crushed its head completely. Before the others could react, she had grabbed the dead warrior's energy weapon and was firing with perfect accuracy. 2 more Zephyrians fell before they knew what was happening. The remaining 2 warriors tried to flank her, but Lisa moved like she had been fighting these creatures her whole life. She dodged their energy blasts with impossible speed and killed them both with moves Jake had never seen before. The entire fight was over in less than 30 seconds. Jake stared at Lisa as she stood over the dead Zephyrians. She was breathing hard, but not from exhaustion. She looked angry, like she had been holding back her true abilities for too long and was relieved to finally use them. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Jake asked. Lisa looked at the energy weapon in her hands, and then at Jake. "I had good teachers. Those weren't human fighting techniques. I've been a soldier for 10 years, and I've never seen moves like that." Lisa helped him to his feet without answering. Jake could see that she was trying to decide how much to tell him. There was definitely more to her story than she had revealed, but he was too sick and tired to press for answers right now. They continued walking through the weakening storm using the Zephyrian energy, weapons for protection. Jake's condition was getting worse by the hour. The fever made him delirious, and he kept stumbling over rocks he should have seen coming. Lisa had to support more of his weight as they moved. "We're close now," Lisa said as they reached the top of a hill. "Just over that ridge." Jake looked where she was pointing, but all he could see was more barren landscape. "I don't see anything. The entrance is hidden." Most people can't find it unless they know exactly where to look. They made their way down the hill, and Lisa led him to what looked like a solid rock wall. She pressed her hand against a section of stone and spoke several words in a language Jake didn't recognize. The wall shimmered and became transparent, revealing a tunnel that led deep underground. "What is this place?" Jake asked as they entered the tunnel. "Somewhere safe," Lisa said, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. The tunnel was lined with lights that came on automatically as they walked. The walls were covered with symbols and writing in multiple alien languages. Jake recognized some of them from intelligence reports he had read about advanced civilizations, but seeing them here meant Lisa had access to technology that was supposed to be beyond human reach. They walked for what felt like miles through the tunnel system. Jake was barely conscious now, and Lisa had to drag him along. His fever was so high that he was hallucinating, seeing shapes and colors that weren't really there. But even in his confused state, he noticed that Lisa seemed to know exactly where she was going. Finally, they reached a large chamber filled with equipment Jake didn't recognize. Lisa helped him sit down against a wall and then walked to a control panel. She began pressing buttons and speaking in that strange language again. "Lisa," Jake said weakly, "who are you really?" She turned to look at him, and he could see tears in her green eyes. "Someone who owes you more than I can ever repay." "That's not an answer." Lisa walked back to where he was sitting and knelt down beside him. "You're dying, Jake. The acid poisoning is too advanced for human medicine to cure. But there's technology here that can save you if you'll let me use it." Jake tried to focus on her face through the fever. "Why would you have access to alien medical technology?" "Because I'm not just a traveler whose transport crashed," Lisa said quietly. "I'm someone who has been living a lie to protect herself. Someone who watched you nearly die to save a stranger and realized that some people are worth saving no matter what it costs." Before Jake could ask what she meant, his fever spiked and he lost consciousness. The last thing he saw was Lisa activating some kind of communication device and speaking rapidly in multiple alien languages. She was calling for help, but not the kind of help any human could provide. Jake woke up to the sound of acid rain still pounding the ruins around them. His makeshift shelter had held through the night, but water was starting to leak through in several places. Lisa was awake too, sitting quietly in the corner and watching him check his equipment. His armor's power was down to 3% and would be completely dead within hours. "We can't stay here much longer," Jake said, as he examined the holes growing larger in their protective covering. "This whole place is falling apart." Lisa nodded and tried to stand on her injured leg. She could put some weight on it now, but walking would still be difficult. "How far is it to your people's evacuation point?" she asked. Jake pulled out his damaged map reader and squinted at the flickering display. "About 20 miles northeast of here. If we move steady and don't run into trouble, we might make it in 2 days. And if we do run into trouble?" Jake looked at his rifle with its 2 remaining shots and then at Lisa's injured leg. "Then we improvise." He spent the next hour gathering anything that might be useful for the journey. The alien materials that had protected them from the acid rain could be fashioned into a crude poncho that would cover both of them if they stayed close together. He found some metal scraps that were still intact and tied them together to make a walking stick for Lisa. His shield was completely dissolved, but he managed to salvage a few pieces of his armor's plating to create a small cover they could hold over their heads. "This won't protect us completely," Jake said as he helped Lisa to her feet. "The acid will get through eventually. We need to move as fast as we can and find shelter every few hours." Lisa tested her weight on the walking stick and nodded. "I can keep up." They left the ruined building and stepped out into the storm. The acid rain hit their makeshift poncho immediately and began eating through the material. Jake held the metal cover over Lisa's head while she leaned on the walking stick. His own head and shoulders were exposed, and the acid began burning his skin. Within minutes, the journey through the dead city was harder than Jake had expected. The streets were flooded with acid water that came up to their ankles, and they had to climb over piles of debris every few blocks. Jake's boots were dissolving, and his feet were starting to burn. The pain made him limp, but he tried not to let Lisa see how much he was suffering. "Your skin is getting worse," Lisa said when they stopped to rest under the remains of a bridge. "You should take better cover." Jake shook his head. "You need it more. That leg wound could get infected if acid gets into it." Lisa stared at him with those strange green eyes. She seemed amazed that he would endure the pain to keep her protected. "Why are you doing this for someone you barely know?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Jake said simply as he adjusted the metal cover to shield her better. "Where I come from, we don't leave people behind." They continued walking through the storm for hours. Jake's exposed skin was covered in acid burns now, and his vision was getting blurry from the pain. The makeshift poncho had holes all through it and was barely providing any protection. Lisa was doing better, but he could see that she was tired and her injured leg was slowing her down. When they reached the edge of the city, Jake spotted movement in the distance. 3 Zephyrian scouts were patrolling the area, their insect-like bodies moving easily through the acid rain. Their natural shells protected them from the storm, and they carried energy weapons that could cut through human armor like paper. "Get down," Jake whispered as he pulled Lisa behind a fallen wall. "Enemy patrol." They crouched in the acid water and watched the alien scouts move past their hiding spot. Jake counted their weapons and calculated distances. With only 2 shots left in his rifle, he could maybe take down one of them before the others killed him and Lisa both. "We'll have to go around," he said quietly. "It'll add hours to our trip, but it's better than fighting them." Lisa looked at the scouts and then back at Jake. "You would fight 3 of them to protect me?" "If I had to, yeah." The detour took them through even worse terrain. They had to climb over rocky hills where the acid rain had carved deep channels in the stone. Jake's boots finally fell apart completely, and he had to walk barefoot over the sharp rocks. Blood mixed with acid burns on his feet, but he kept moving. Lisa offered to let him lean on her walking stick, but he refused, saying she needed it more by. The time they found shelter in a cave, Jake was barely conscious from the pain. His skin was red and blistered all over, his feet were cut and bleeding, and his armor's power had died hours ago. Lisa helped him sit down against the cave wall and used pieces of her strange fabric to bandage his worst wounds. "You're going to die if we keep going like this," she said as she worked on his feet. "Your body can't take much more acid exposure." Jake looked at his damaged hands and nodded. "Maybe, but we don't have a choice. If we stay here, we'll both die when the cave floods or the Zephyrians find us." Lisa was quiet for a long time as she finished bandaging his wounds. Jake could see her thinking about something, but he was too tired to ask what it was. He shared his last energy bar with her and tried to rest while the storm continued outside. "Jake," Lisa said finally, "what if I told you there might be another way to get help? What kind of help?" Lisa hesitated as if she was about to reveal a secret. "There are other people on this planet," Not human, but they might be willing to help us if we can reach them. Jake studied her face in the dim light. There was something she wasn't telling him, but he was too exhausted to press for details. How far? Maybe half a day from here. But the path goes through Zephyrian territory. Jake closed his eyes and tried to think clearly despite the pain. Half a day through enemy territory with no weapons and failing equipment. It was probably suicide, but staying in the cave was definitely death. At least moving gave them a chance. "We'll try it," he said. "But first we need to rest and let this storm weaken a little." Lisa nodded and settled down next to him in the cave. Jake noticed that she positioned herself so she could watch the entrance while he slept. It was a small thing, but it showed she was thinking tactically. There was definitely more to Lisa than she had told him, but right now all that mattered was keeping them both alive until they could reach safety. Jake Martinez pressed his back against the crumbling wall and tried to catch his breath. The acidic rain hammered down on the ruined city around him, eating through metal and stone like it was made of sugar. His power armor sparked and hissed, where the acid had found its way through the cracks. 3 days had passed since the ambush that killed his entire squad, and he was still alive somehow. The Zephyrian insects had come out of nowhere. One moment his team was setting up a communication relay in what looked like an abandoned alien city, and the next moment they were surrounded by creatures that looked like giant praying mantises, with too many arms and glowing red eyes. Jake had watched his friends die one by one as their weapons barely scratched the enemy's thick shells. He only survived because he had been on perimeter duty when the attack started and managed to hide in the ruins. Now he was alone on this hostile planet with failing equipment and no way to call for help. His rifle had 2 shots left, his armor's power was down to 15%, and the acid rain was slowly dissolving everything he owned. The storm had been going on for days without any sign of stopping. The locals who built this city must have known how to deal with it, but they were long gone now. Jake pulled out his last energy bar and ate half of it, saving the rest for later. He needed to find better shelter soon, or the acid would eat through his armor completely. His shield was already showing holes where the rain had been hitting it. The metal was strong, but not strong enough to handle this planet's weather for much longer. That was when he heard the cry for help. It was faint over the sound of the storm, but it was definitely human. A woman's voice calling out in English. Jake looked around the empty street and listened again. There it was, coming from a collapsed building about 50 meters away. He grabbed his shield and ran toward the sound, splashing through puddles of acid that made his boots smoke. The building had been some kind of store or market before it fell down. Chunks of alien concrete and twisted metal beams lay everywhere. Jake followed the voice to a pile of rubble near what might have been the back wall. He could see a hand sticking out from under a heavy beam. "Help me, please," the voice said again. Weaker this time, Jake dropped his rifle and grabbed the beam with both hands. It was heavier than it looked, and the acid rain was making everything slippery. He pulled and strained until the beam shifted enough for him to see the person trapped underneath. It was a young woman, maybe 25 years old, with dark hair and pale skin. She looked human, but her clothes were strange, made from some kind of fabric he had never seen before that seemed to repel the acid rain. "Hold on," Jake said as he worked to move more debris. "I'm going to get you out of there." The woman looked up at him with bright green eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. She was hurt but conscious, and she watched him work without complaining. Jake noticed that she spoke English well, but with a slight accent he could not place. When he finally cleared enough rubble to pull her free, he saw that her left leg was bleeding and she could not put weight on it. "Thank you," she said as he helped her sit up against the wall. "I thought I was going to die under there. What's your name?" Jake asked as he looked around for better shelter. The acid rain was getting worse and his shield was dissolving fast. "Lisa," she said. "I was traveling when the storm started. My transport crashed and I ran into this building for cover." Jake nodded but did not ask more questions. There would be time for that later if they survived. Right now, he needed to find a way to keep them both alive. His shield was down to maybe an hour of protection, and then they would be exposed to the acid rain with no cover at all. He spotted what looked like a deeper section of the ruin, building where some walls were still standing. If he could get Lisa over there and set up some kind of shelter, they might have a chance. The problem was that she could not walk, and he would need to carry her while protecting them both from the rain. Listen carefully, Jake said as he positioned his shield over both of them. I'm going to carry you to better shelter, but we'll be moving through the storm. This shield won't last much longer, so we need to move fast. Lisa looked at the holes appearing in the metal shield above their heads. You're risking your life for someone you just met, she said quietly. That's what people do, Jake replied as he picked her up. We help each other. He had said it without thinking, but the words seemed to surprise Lisa. She stared at him with those strange green eyes as he carried her through the acid rain toward the partial shelter. Jake held the dissolving shield above them with one hand while supporting her weight with the other arm. The acid that got through the holes burned his exposed skin, but he did not slow down. They made it to the deeper section of the building just as the shield finally gave out completely. Jake threw the useless metal aside and looked around for anything else he could use for protection. He found some sheets of alien material that seemed resistant to the acid and managed to create a crude tent over a dry corner. Your arm is burned, Lisa said. She examined the red marks on his skin where the acid had touched him. Jake looked at the burns but shrugged. I'll be fine. Are you hurt anywhere besides your leg? Lisa shook her head. Just bruised. You saved my life out there. Don't worry about it, Jake said as he checked his equipment. His armor was down to 8% power, and his rifle still had only 2 shots. We need to figure out how to get off this planet. Do you know anything about the local area? Lisa was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to tell him. There might be some working technology in the old government district, she said finally. But it's dangerous to travel during the storm. Jake looked out at the acid rain falling in sheets across the ruined city. They could not stay here forever. Soon his armor would fail completely, and then the acid would kill them both. But traveling through the storm would be just as deadly. Without proper protection, he made his decision. They would wait for the storm to weaken and then try to reach the government district. Until then, he would keep Lisa safe no matter what it cost him. It was what any decent person would do.